Hello, ladies, and welcome to the Beyond Medicine Humanized Care for Women of Influence. Today, I have with me Dr. Sandra, who she is a family physician and is also a coach, and she is located in New York. So, welcome to the show, Dr. Sandra. Thank you for being here. Do you want to say a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yes. So thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here today. As you mentioned, I'm a family physician and I am also coaching now. And that's really become a big part of the work that I do. A lot of that has kind of stemmed from my own journey in being coached myself, experiencing burnout, and really seeing the value in all these sort of tools and strategies that I learned that I hadn't been aware of, even with my medical training. I think for me in particular, when I became a mom, I really noticed that there was a big sort of shift in a big transition, right? A big shift in my identity. And all the coping strategies that I had before weren't really working so well for me anymore. And I kind of was feeling in this place of feeling really stressed out, feeling really overwhelmed and was sort of looking for my own tools for myself and for my patients who I think were going through very similar experiences for different transitions in their life. And what I kind of got from that was that there is a lot that we can do. There is a lot that kind of isn't sort of always standardly talked about. It's not like, here, take this medication and you're on your way. But it's really led me to the work that I'm doing now in terms of kind of helping people who are in that place of feeling stressed, feeling overwhelmed, not necessarily clinically diagnosed with anxiety or depression or whatnot, but still affected enough that it's impacting their day to day. That's where I'm at now.
Good. And I think that what you mentioned of recognizing, okay, this is impacting our capacity to function is a way to perhaps recognize something's going on and this needs to be addressed. So, today, ladies, I am going to be talking with Dr. Sandra on the topic of stress. And today's episode is titled Mastery of Stress, Harnessing Its Power Instead of Just Managing It. So, how about if we start talking about how you want to define stress for the context of this conversation?
Yeah, so I think that's really important because oftentimes when it comes to stress, we have these very negative associations with it, right? Stress is always bad. Stress is like something we don't want. Stress is something that brings us down. And even though when we use words like we have to manage stress, like it just feels like it's this burden. It's thing that we have to spend so much time on, right? And when it comes to stress, it really, for me, took sort of this mindset shift. And that was helpful in thinking that, well, stress is not necessarily either good or bad. It just kind of is. It is what it is, right? There are good experiences of stress. There are maybe not so beneficial experiences of stress. But stress itself is really just our body's natural response or reaction to change or challenges. Okay.
Mhm.
So basically, stressors in our life. It's a physiological response. It's our activation of our sympathetic nervous system, our fight or flight. Let's get the adrenaline pumping. Let's get moving. We got to deal with this thing in front of us, this challenge, this change, whatever it is, right? The original example is this bear that's like out in front of us. We don't usually run into bears as often anymore, but it all feels the same to our body. It's just sort of this, if you can think of it as it's just this physiological response that happens that is meant to help us survive and to protect us, really, then we don't necessarily look at it as such a negative, burdensome thing. And then we can work with it.
Yes. And I think that what you mentioned in terms of, so if we have this perspective of stress needs to be managed, then that still turns our body, we need to control. And whenever we go into control, it's power and control have everything to do with trauma response in our brain. which part of what you're saying is this going into parasympathetic, sympathetic. So our body's natural way of dealing with stress. And I think that is very important to mention. We need that sometimes because sometimes, yes, maybe we don't need to run from a bear nowadays, but there's still things that happen nowadays that can be threatening to our survival. And whenever that happens, anything that is threatening to my persona, my body's going to respond in that way. So the difficulty and the challenge comes when my body is feeling every day constantly, oh, I am being threatened. I'm not saying something bad is going to happen because then that's when things in our body and in our mind start to change when it comes to specifically related to like stress and how we handle stress. Can you clarify for our learners, or not for our learners, for our listeners, even that I hope that they learn, so, yeah. So, what is it that we call like good stress versus bad stress? And how can we recognize, oh, this is stress that is beneficial for my body? This is stress that right now is maybe depleting for my body.
Yeah. So I think that's really important to talk about. So I'm glad you asked. Good stress really is the term in the literature is eustress, right? And this is this positive short-term stress that really helps to motivate and fuel you. Okay. It's the kind of stress that enhances your performance, that allows you to achieve success, right? It makes you feel energized. So I like to think of it as it's when I'm feeling pumped up and ready to go, like I can tackle the world, right? And that can kind of come through a lot of experiences that are still challenging and can still be hard and difficult. Like, let's say you want to learn how to, I don't know, play guitar, right? And that's something new, right? It's something hard. It's something that you might feel kind of like stressed, like, oh, I'm not getting it, whatever it is. But you also have this ability to be like, hey, no, I can do this, right? Like if I motivate myself, if I kind of get over that, if I can feel energized and your body recognizes that, like it wants to do it, it wants to help you, right? So when you're in sort of a new experience, like let's say you're about to have a baby, right? Like there's an excitement there. Like your heart might be pounding and you're breathing quickly and you're nervous and you're scared, right? But there's an excitement to it, right? And the thing with good stress is that it's usually with situations that are semi acute in nature, right? So it's sort of something quick. You have this burst of energy, right? This sympathetic response. And then you're able to kind of relax after it, and your body has time to kind of rest and recover before the next big thing, right? So that's good stress. That's the stress that kind of helps us accomplish our goals, helps us enjoy life and enjoy new experiences, even though they're scary and they're stressful. But we're able to recover. We're able to come back to kind of this good, neutral place. Distress is really that sort of what we call that bad stress, where it's not really beneficial to us. And a lot of times we see that more with chronic stress, right? Or situations where we feel like we really don't feel confident that we can kind of achieve or get to where we want to go. And so then we sort of start feeling more of this almost like anxiety that comes up, this anxious feelings, right? Of like, I can't do this. And how am I going to do this? And right. And that tends to last. So if you're having problems in your marriage or trouble at work, and it's just like every day you're facing these things, you never really have time to go back to that rest. It's not that short term burst of energy, get through this problem, this issue, and now I can relax, right? Now I'm settled again. You never have that. And so that can be that kind of stress that's not beneficial to you. It's wearing you down because it's day in, day out, and you never get to recover from it. And then the concern there is that if you're in that for too long, or if the stress is sort of overwhelming your ability, right? That you do get to this place of overwhelm, right? And that's a whole nother thing. We tend to kind of think it's the same thing as stress. I'm stressed, I'm overwhelmed. It's really not the same thing. It's really a whole nother level.
Yes. So I think that I can use the exercise as an example of like good stress. We know that provokes inflammation in your body, but at the same time, there is all of these other hormones that gets released. You're doing it for a constraint in an amount of time. You feel good. It helps you maybe cope, be more alert, do the rest of the stuff that you need to do during the day. If you do it in the morning, like me, and that's why people talk about the runner's high. And then when you're talking about like the bad stress, it sounds like one, there is a chronicity to it
Yeah.
where perhaps the person is in a position of maybe, yes, I can walk away from this, but perhaps not. Abuse, right? Being one of them. Like when you think of a child that is growing up in an environment that is not healthy, that there can be, whether it is physical, mental, emotional abuse, that child is exposed to it for a lot of years. And then because of the child being a little one, cannot either walk away from it. But then as adults, you might be also in situations where you might feel powerless, or you might feel trapped. You might feel, okay, what can I do here? Or maybe you don't even recognize that it's affecting your body and how you're feeling, and that, oh my God, this is not good because
Right.
for a long time you have been in it and it's almost like it becomes now normal. This is the normal way of living and feeling. So I think that part of what I'm hearing is this distinction between so what this stress does to our bodies and how our bodies feel and respond, and then also constrained to this time, plus this decision of when I want to exercise, I decide that I want to exercise. If I want
Mm.
to learn the piano, I am deciding that I want to learn the piano, right? So like I'm in control. It's just that I'm trying not to use that word, right? So I'm making the choice versus perhaps I am not making the choice. And I feel that this choice is just not good for me. And maybe I feel like I cannot even do anything about the choice. Does that sound about right?
Yeah. And I think that's really important because there are a lot of situations and circumstances, right, where like you said, you aren't in control. Motherhood for me was a big one, right? I was a very type A personality. I'm used to being in control, making what I want to happen. And now all of a sudden, like I'm not in control. It's a crash course in not being in control, right? Um, but at the same time, there are still within that, there are choices, there are decisions, there are that you get to make. There are ways that you get to respond that you do have control over. So I always tell people you could be in a terrible situation. So you lost your job, your child is sick, like everything is going wrong, right? Like I mean the most stressful, like difficult situations. And you can still find a way. Challenging takes a lot of practice, right? But you can still find a way to harness that kind of stress, to kind of get yourself in a place of feeling more calm and more controlled despite the chaos that is around you. Because we can't, let's be real. I can't tell people, oh, your stress is going to disappear. We can make your stress disappear. We can't, right? We can certainly make certain things, right? We can control what we can control. But a big part of it is, okay, how do we get to the point where we can still feel safe within ourselves even when everything is chaos around us, right? And how do we stay in that safe place rather than getting to this place of overwhelm, which is when we feel like we've completely lost control?
Mhm, mhm. Yes, and I think that it's very important. So to talk a little bit about what this overwhelm means and how you defined it, but then going back to learning to recognize the signals of your body. Because sometimes what happens when we have been the chronicity of it, if we have been exposed to a lot of situations that have provoked like that bad stress where I don't feel in control. I don't know how to cope, manage. I don't have the skills because maybe you were too young to have the skills. That was too much for you. Let's just be honest. So learning to then recognize that in our body, sometimes it's challenging. And especially in the Western culture that we by ourselves, we live too much here and we have this really big heads and then these really tiny little bodies because it's we've got head right here. And then we do not know what's going on. And we think that only the head can speak to us and help us make decisions. But our body is more gentle and it's more kind in helping us understand, yes, I want to do this. No, I don't want to do this. And sometimes what happens is that our body's even telling us, and what
Mhm.
maybe you're not even recognizing what your body's telling you. You just don't know what that means. You just know that, oh my God, I don't feel well. Well, let me just have a glass of wine because I know that when I feel like the glass of wine helps me, or whatever it is that you go to. Or you might recognize it and okay, my body's telling me this is not good, but maybe you feel that you're still not completely in power to say, okay, I'm going to make the choice or whatever the decision needs to be to bring me back into safety, into my safe zone. Which I also want to say, this can look very different in certain seasons of your life. And I think it's totally important to mention.
Yep.
And especially because, and I'm going to use this example, let's say that you have an aging parent that you are taking care of. Well, that already is adding like a layer of maybe what we can call stress. So maybe in that season, because you're a physician and you know that being a physician adds a layer of stress, you choose well, I am going because we make choices based on our values. Well, I'm going to take care of my parents. And maybe what I'm going to do for a season so that I can manage that stress is I'm not going to work or I'm going to work part time. So, what I'm trying to say is there are seasons in our life that bring different challenges, and we might choose well, I'm going to, in this season of my life, I'm going to deal with this stress, with this challenge. And there are other things that I'm not even going to care.
Yeah. And that is so critical. That's really, really critical because that's exactly what it is. If we cannot address and go in 100% to every stressor that's facing us at all times, right? We need to really identify what's mission critical and what is important to us. And that can be hard. That can be hard, especially as women who where what's important to us have often has been kind of told to us, that you need to take care of others and you need to do this and you need to do that. And then this is how you should be and whatnot. And so it can be hard sometimes to even be able to say, like, no, 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 this is what's important to me, even though it might mean I have to put some other things on the side, even though it might mean yeah, I might need to go part time at work or I might need to make some really hard choices, right? And that's not what's expected of me, or that's not what everyone would do necessarily in my shoes, but that's what's right for me in my current situation, right? And so a lot of that kind of those decisions, those choices come from when you're able to like step back and actually not be in this hyper overwhelmed state, right? Where you have sort of the regulation to be calm, look at all of your options, brainstorm, think about what do I need to prioritize, what needs to shift, what changes need to happen, right? And there's a lot that you can do there. And sometimes with the help of a coach or a mentor or a family member or whatever it is, right? To kind of help you sort those pieces so that it is in alignment with what actually matters to you, not what everybody else is telling you should matter to you, right? But one of the key things to be able to do that, to get to that point, is what you mentioned, which is really being able to tune into yourself so that you're able to regulate and you're able to keep yourself from just spiraling into overwhelm. Because a lot of times that's what happens is we have so much on your plate, right? You might be the physician who has aging parents, whose child is sick this week, who, and you don't have backup and all these things, right? And now everything just feels like it's completely out of your control, right? You don't know what to do. And instead of trying to figure it out, you end up scrolling on your phone for like an hour because you just want to kind of numb yourself and avoid, or grabbing that glass of wine or whatever it is that you can to just make the discomfort go away. Even
Mhm.
though you know intellectually it's just going to be there right on the other side waiting for you, right? And so it's really this. Intellectually, there's a lot of things that you can do, hard choices, right? Hard decisions, but you can make them sometimes with some support and whatnot. But it's also really of the, how can I keep myself regulated enough so that I can use this stressful situation to actually empower me to make the decisions and the choices, to live my life in a way that makes sense, makes this feel less chaotic, and where I can get a sense of like I have control over myself, right? Because a lot of times we don't have that control. We don't have control over our surroundings, and we don't have control over ourselves, our emotions, our reactions, we're just all over the place, right? And so that's a big important step.
Yes. And I want to mention, so I think it is important to understand this self control is related to self regulation. You cannot self regulate if you're in sympathetic mode, fight, freeze, fly. So, helping your body and your mind first come to this place of safety, that by itself will calm down your little amygdala and lesser brain. And then you can have this introspection. Then you can develop this awareness. And now I can start to, okay, what are the choices that I have? And what are those choices that I need to make and that I need to prioritize? So you have mentioned the word overwhelmed 2 times. So do you want to tell our listeners, what do you mean by overwhelm, and how maybe that's a little bit different than when we talk about stress, and how can we recognize that in our bodies?
Yeah. So this was a big sort of learning point for myself, actually, because I always use the word interchangeably. And I very much felt that way. I'm overwhelmed. I am stressed out. Like it's all one and the same, right? And it's really not. And the key here is that when we talked about stress before and we defined it and kind of this physiologic reaction rate, and we're in this sympathetic state and it's this fight or flight, it's this very high energy, very activated state. We're feeling our heart race and we're breathing quickly and we're pumped up, right? And so even though it may be a scary threat, our body is like getting ready to mobilize, right? When we are in that state and basically either it's too much, too fast, like way too much stress, too many threats. There's like 500 bears around us, right? And we can't see a way out. We can't fight them. We can't run from all of them. Or we just don't have enough resources for too
Mhm.
long. We're just in the situation for too long, right? Where we've just depleted our capacity to handle it. That's when we get to overwhelm. And overwhelm is that feeling of, I can't do this anymore. I can't even think about it. I have so much to do. It's too much. It's too much. I don't know where to start. I want to curl up in a ball. And I don't even want to think about this. And so that's when we do the binge watching TV and the scrolling on our phones or whatever it is to avoid that uncomfortable feeling because it's just too, and it's really what we call the freeze response, right? So you have this sympathetic state, but then you have this freeze response, which is it's not a high energy state. It's kind of the opposite where we're feeling kind of almost disconnected from our body. So we don't have to feel because it's too big, it's too hard. And then that's when we go to these sort of like coping mechanisms, really, of eating, of overworking, of whatever it is, drinking to numb those uncomfortable feelings, to kind of avoid them, to not have to experience that. And so, yeah, so really when you're thinking about stress and overwhelm is sort of the extreme. It's like when you have extreme stress, it's like so much, it's beyond your capacity, or you've just been in this so long, you just can't do it anymore, right? Then you're feeling overwhelmed. And it's a very much more shut down response. And so that's why when we're talking about listening to the body, your body is going to tell you, are you stressed out? And we can do something with that? Or are you overwhelmed? And really, we need to like get you back to, in both instances, you want to get more regulated. But when you're overwhelmed, if you don't get more regulated, you're not going to do anything. And so really tuning into your body and feeling like, okay, am I like feeling like my heart's racing? I'm like nervous. I got this like pit in my stomach. What's going on here? Right. Like I have this like energy, like my blood's flowing and I can do something with this versus I want to go curl up in a ball. Like I don't want to talk to anybody. I just don't want to think about this. Like it's too much. And so that's kind of how you differentiate.
Yes, and I think that it's also important to mention. So, in this, what you mentioned or talk about overwhelm, which again is this freeze, full on response where it's too much. I'm going to detach. So, you detach from your body, what you're feeling, but you also detach from the world. You detach from your relationship. So, you're really not present, even if you're there.
Yeah.
And I think that this can also look, and I'm going to use this example as the person that maybe goes out every night looking for a party or a social gathering. And I am just going to be social and outgoing because, again, looking in, dealing with the situation is too much. So it doesn't necessarily have to look like a person in bed, lying in bed and not wanting to get out of bed. It can also look like the person that continues to do behaviors to escape, to I'm not going to
Mhm.
deal with it. I'm just going to turn my face from it. And it can look very different in the behavior. So I just use that example of somebody that every night has something to do and has to go somewhere and never has time for solitude. Because having time for solitude, maybe you don't even know how to do that, but that can be very scary because then that means that I need to start to feel and experience
Mhm.
what's going on. And that is too much. So when we are talking about this overwhelm and the window of tolerance. So one, explain to us what is this window of tolerance, but then also how is it that from that window of tolerance we go to the overwhelm with this being hypo vigilant in a way, and then how is it that we can go into hyper vigilant? And why is it that, yes, in life, we're going to have these moments where we go from our window of tolerance to hyper to hypo, but when to recognize I'm going too much into hyper or I'm going too much into hypo, therefore, what can I do to come back to my window of tolerance? So I can live a little bit more in my window of tolerance and close. I remember a therapist explained to me like the window of tolerance is like a pool, and then you start to put in the pool like balls. And then when no more balls can fit into your pool and they're floating, then you just decide that you're going to build a bigger pool. And her point is there is some healthiness to that, but you cannot always be trying to build a bigger pool because eventually you cannot just build bigger pools and bigger pools and bigger pools. So, talk to us a little bit about the concept of window of tolerance and how can we deal with this and come back from hyper to hypo and live closer to it? And how much do we really want to expand it versus how much do we want to like stay in that like
Mhm.
gentle flow?
Yeah. This idea of window of tolerance is really sort of like the distance between your sort of most what we call ventral vagal state, your kind of really your relaxed, kind of calm, steadied state, right? And then your sympathetic or your dorsal states, right? And so think of sympathetic, we talked about, that's kind of like your stress response. And then your dorsal state is really like that overwhelmed state, right? Of that hypoarousal. So that distance, right? And how quickly you jump into your sympathetic state, right? Usually you go to sympathetic and then you go to your dorsal, to your kind of overwhelmed state. That amount of time is really your window of tolerance. So, for example, people who have had a lot of chronic stress in their life or a lot of traumas in their life, they are much more likely to get triggered in such a way that they jump right into this stressed sympathetic state in their day to day, right? It's triggering them, it's reminding them, it kind of is activating that fear zone of, because like we said before, your body doesn't really know the difference between this is just a minor thing here. Oh, someone didn't look at me the right way versus the world's going to end because this person didn't look at me. Like something bad is going to happen. Like it doesn't know the difference, right? A threat is a threat, and it's what it perceives, whether or not it's true. It's what your body perceives. Someone who has a lot of trauma or has had a lot of chronic stress in the past may start noticing those little things and kind of trigger and jump into the sympathetic state more quickly, right? I often see this in clients also like in their relationships, right? When they've been in a relationship for a while and all these little things kind of start happening. And in the beginning, no, that didn't really trigger you, right? But you had this chronic stress, and now the slightest thing sets you off, right? And so that it causes these chronic stressors cause your window of tolerance to get smaller and smaller over time. And what we want to do is we want to be able to expand it to grow, like you were talking about, so that we don't necessarily jump right into our sympathetic or stress response immediately, right? We're able to stay grounded. We're able to use that more logical side of our brain to kind of think through this and work through it. Um, but as we talked about, stress is important and we need stress and it's a good thing, right? Stress helps to facilitate change. It helps us to grow. It helps us to expand our comfort zone. So I like to think of this almost like it's a muscle in the sense that you want to look at your sense of stress like a muscle. You want to exercise it. You want to go there, right? You want to stress yourself out. You want to be able to expand and push a little bit, but you also need to rest and relax, right? Because just like going to the gym or exercising too much, it's a good thing, but too much of it is not so good, right? You have to know your limits. You have to know where you're going beyond your capacity, right? And we can think of it in exactly the same way. When you're in your window of tolerance and you want to be able to dip into the stress, right? To dip into the pool, as you were with the example you were giving, because that's going to stretch you. That's going to make you grow. That's the exercise that you need to develop. But you also want to be able to come back. All right.
Yeah.
When you get to that point where it's too much, we're like, okay, now we're in that overwhelmed state. And we need to be able to say, like, okay, we need to rest now. And then we need to be able to help ourselves regulate and get out of that state, come back, okay, to that more calm state in order to expand that window of tolerance over time, right? So there is good in sort of both of these approaches. You want to be able to expand that window of tolerance, but you also want to get really comfortable with, yeah, I'm going to get stressed and I'm going to get overwhelmed sometimes. And that's life. Like it's going to happen. I can't be perfect 100%. We will never be. And accepting that. And that's not a bad thing, but that this is an exercise and it's a chance to practice. Okay, I got to that state and now I'm going to practice getting myself back. And the more and more you do that, the more you realize that being stressed or even overwhelmed, it's not a scary thing. It doesn't need to be, right? It feels that way, but it doesn't need to be because you can't control the stressors around you, like we said, but you can control how you get yourself back to that state of calm in the midst of all the chaos.
Yes. And going back to your example of like exercising, so I want to mention a couple of things. So when you start to exercise, you don't start necessarily running a marathon because it's too much for your body. So you train your body. And in this process of training, you might hire a professional trainer or you might join a community of other runners. So you plan, you anticipate, you go slow. You are a friend to your body. You get community, you get help from other people. And sometimes we just forget that we have to do the same thing, right? In these situations of our life. And then also, I want to mention that it's like going into, I call it a pool. Sometimes we don't have the capacity every day to go into the pool. And knowing that sometimes it's okay to sit at the edge and just dip our toes. Sometimes you are all for it and I can go into a swim. And then also recognizing if you're swimming, when your body starts to feel tired, and therefore I'm going to come out of the pool and I'm going to take a break. And I'm going to, whether it is, I don't know, do a sun bath, take something to drink, whatever it is that you're going to do. And then perhaps you go back into the pool or you go back to dipping your toes. So it's like this rhythm that we do and learning that it's okay to have these rhythms and recognizing that I don't have to run the marathon from the get go just because I feel that that's what I need to do. So as we're coming closer to like the end, what I wanted, so two things that I would like you to go a little bit into it. What perhaps could be maybe three tools or three coping mechanisms, so three practical things that the listeners can do. One, when they start to feel in this overwhelm. And two, what are maybe some three good stresses that you would say, hey, practice this or embrace this from something as simple as exercise that they can do every day, but maybe something as challenging as, I don't know, trying something new, like going to a spoken word and getting on the mic and doing a 3-minute poem. So, what are some maybe things that you can recommend to our listeners in those two areas?
Yeah. So I think when we talk about, okay, what can we do when we're feeling really overwhelmed, right? To kind of help regulate ourselves. I think that one of the key things to remember is that it can look different for everyone and it can look different in every situation. And so really you want to have a couple of different things and try it out for yourself and practice them, right? To see what works and when. So even really something as easy as I'm going to go outside and I'm just going to get some fresh air. I'm going to go for a 2-minute walk, like just going to pace back, back and forth and just kind of feel the cold air. It's chilly here. I don't know where you are. It might be warm. But, just go out there, feel the sun on me, hear the birds chirping, really connect with your surroundings, get really focused. It's really a practice in kind of being mindful, like mindfulness and all of that. It's focusing your energy and your thoughts so that you're not in that spiral, right? Now, that may be easy to do, or it may not be. If you are sitting in the middle of a meeting, you're not going to be like, hey, sorry, I'm going to go for my little walk now so I can feel more regulated, right? So then you're going to need different kinds of tools, right? So that's sometimes where I think of, okay, how else can I be mindful or I can ground myself, right? So it may just be feeling the weight of my body in my chair, feeling the contact between my thighs on the chair. And how heavy does that feel? My feet on the ground, right? And focusing my attention there. It can be rubbing my fingers together and really feeling all the little edges of all the little lines in my fingers to extent where you never focus on that. And just really focusing your attention on there. And just doing that briefly can really bring you back away from all the thoughts of all the spiraling, right? It helps to, in a sense, almost activate your parasympathetic state where you're just kind of like focused. You're calm. You're able to just think about one thing and put all your attention there. But these are things I would say that you have to be practicing. If you're just doing them in the moment and expecting everything to feel better, it's probably not going to work. Your body's going to have a really hard time tuning into whatever it is that you're trying to tune into because it's not used to that. It's used to tuning into all the thoughts and all the craziness and everything around you, right? So this is something that you want to be practicing on a regular basis when
Yeah,
you are not overwhelmed and stressed.
yeah. And sorry to interrupt you, but I'm going to say it now because it comes in now. So I think that what you're saying is instead of just saying, oh, well, when I'm feeling, I don't know, the palpitations, I'm going to take 10 deep breaths, which, yes, that will also help. What part of what you're saying is, how about if you develop a daily rituals, daily rhythm? So the way that I say this is a way of living. Can you develop a way of living that facilitates this rhythm in your body and in your brain? And it sounds like that's what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we really need to train our bodies to kind of know that this is how we kind of get in tune with ourselves, that this is how we can consistently get back to that calm, settled state, right? And the more that we do it, the more our body associates that with a calm, settled state,
Mhm.
right? And so then we're able to do it. And it's almost like that becomes a new trigger, right? When you do that, your body knows, oh, yeah, this is associated with this calm, settled state. So it helps you move there faster. And like I said, that can be all sorts of things. For me, I'm somebody who really loves to dance. I've been dancing since I was a little girl. And I know that if I can put on some music, it could just be one song and I let loose and I look silly and crazy and whatnot, right? But that will shake out all that excess energy. It just does. It helps it to move through me. And a lot of different practices can do that. That's also why yoga and Tai Chi, some of these different modalities really work because they do help to both focus your thoughts as well as get that energy moving, that energy from that sympathetic state. It kind of gets it moving and flowing through your body. Um, but the more you do it, like I said, the more then your body associates that with this pleasurable kind of state, with this calm kind of state, and it becomes more automatic. So you want to be incorporating this every day. And it's even more than a ritual, it's a daily practice, really. And so that when those stressful, overwhelming situations arise, you have fallbacks and you have fallbacks that you can do when you have time to do them. And then you can also kind of categorize it by this is the tool I can pull out when I'm sitting in front of a bunch of people and I'm in the middle of a conversation and I can't just step out, right? This is what I can do in that moment. These are the tools that I can do when I can go out for an hour-long yoga session. Great. Okay, that's wonderful. But sometimes I can't. I got 15 minutes, and what can I do in those 15 minutes? And the more that you've practiced them and you've tested different things, you've tried them, and you see what effect it has on you, like how does your body feel after that? Does it feel better? Does it help you, right? Even if it's just a little bit, then you try it again next time. And is it a little bit more? Right. And you start to recognize what works. And then you have this whole toolbox of, we talked about grounding, mindfulness, deep breathing, dancing, somatic exercises, yoga, whatever it is. The list goes on. And that's kind of the things that you can absolutely work with someone to figure out. You can look up, you can just test different things out.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. But especially the testing and then listening to your body. And then I also want to say that one of the things that you can sit down and think about is so growing up, were things that make you feel good, that you enjoy, that make you happy, make you laugh. So I have an adult scooter, and from time to time, I get into that scooter. People look at me, and some people are like, oh, that's cool. I don't even use it necessarily to transport myself. I know that I can use it for that. Sometimes I just want to go outside and just feel the wind. Oh, I'm free. So going back to things that growing up were good for you, I also use my hammock because growing up, I would study in my hammock in my backyard. So recognizing things that also made you feel good in your body growing up, that can be very is easy and simple, and you can grasp again. I think that's very important. So then, Dr. Skindra, tell me, I understand that you have a little freebie for our listeners, and I will put all the links into the show notes. But can you tell the listeners a little bit about that freebie, what it is, what it has, and why they should get it?
Yes, I'm sharing with your listeners the Declutter Your Mind Guide. And the reason that I created this was because a lot of times when we're feeling really stressed, right? We talked about there's sort of two ways that we can approach it. One is being able to regulate ourselves and get to that place of calmness, no matter what else is going on. But then there is all the stuff that we can actually control, that we can do, right, to help limit the amount of stress that comes our way. And so that's really what the Declutter Your Mind Guide is, because I think, especially as women, there we talk about the mental load. We talk about what are all the things that we are carrying in our head day in, day out that we feel responsible for, right? Because we feel responsible for everyone and everything around us. And it's how can we get a handle on that? How can we have practical tools and strategies to get all those open tabs, close them in our head? And there's a lot of different ways that we can do that. And this is going to give you 10 steps that you can work through and see what works for you, what you might need some additional support with, what's not working, what's something you haven't really thought about before. But when we can kind of close those tabs, it makes it so much easier for us to really see, like, hey, what's important here? What are the things that I need to be focusing on? And where is it worth spending my time, energy, stress on? Right. And so that's really kind of the big step is whittling all of that away and really being able to hone in on what matters and how am I going to focus on that.
Yes, I love it. So thank you for sharing that with our listeners. And again, I'll put the links into the show notes. So if some of the listeners want to work with you, so one, if you are in New York and you're looking for a family physician, hey, I don't know, maybe she has an opening. But in specifically in the coaching side, which I know that you're not limited geographically, if ladies want to work with you, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, the beauty of coaching is yes, I can work with anyone everywhere, anywhere. Well, we do our sessions virtually, but they can find me at my website, which is sandrafernandez.com. That's Fernandez with an S at the end, not a Z. That's a very common spelling, but it's with an S at the end. That's the Portuguese kind of way of writing it. You can also find me on Instagram at Sandra Fernandez MD. And so you can, shoot me a DM. I'm happy to chat, talk about what's going on with you. Or on my website, you can even schedule a free strategy session so we can really talk about how we can help you get it together so you do feel like you have more control of the choices and decisions you're making. So you're more in control of your days, your time, your energy, when you can really spend your time and be present for what actually matters.
Great. Yes. And I will also put in the show notes the link to schedule that free session with Dr. Sandra. So it will be very easy peasy. You will just click on the link and it will take you to it. So thank you for being here with me and with our listeners. Before we go, is there anything else, any last words of wisdom or inspiration that you want to leave our listeners with, our ladies with?
Well, first, I just wanted to add that you can schedule that strategy call with me at any time. But if you do book a coaching package as a listener of Dr. Maria and you let me know that that's where you found me, I will add on a free additional coaching session to any coaching package. So just want to put that out there for your listeners because they are amazing and I really want them to get value out of this. And in terms of just kind of like last thoughts, I really want to say, don't be afraid of stress. Don't be afraid of it. It is there your body has this response for a reason. It's there to help you. It's there to help you accomplish your goals and your dreams, right? It's not there to get in your way, even though it feels that way, right? And so we want to be able to know that it's there, it has a place. We can go to it when we need it, right? And we can also bring ourselves back to this good feeling place when that's where we'd rather be. And just know that you have the power and you have the control over that.
Yes, I love it. You have empowerment. You can choose. You can go in and you can go out. And it's not always detrimental to you. So there are certain types of stress, exercise, cold plunges being two of them, that there's actually evidence that it's good for your body and that you can practice from time to time. So, once again, thank you, Dr. Sandra, for being here with me. I will be posting all of the links into the show notes. Thank you for our listeners. And again, if you have any suggestions about future topics, you can send me an email and then please review us in your podcast of preference. Because when you review the podcast, then that puts it in front of more listeners. So more ladies like you can get the right information, the right message, and they can continue to foster a good health and a good relationship with their bodies. Until next time, thank you.
Thank you.